Okay, Mr. Purchase, I just have a few questions for you today.
Sure.
First question is, what is your party specifically going to do about the high cost of living in the Northwest Territories? And you can provide one or two examples.
Sure. I've lived in the Northwest Territories my entire life, here in the Western Arctic and in the Eastern Arctic, what's now Nunavut. So I am very aware of how expensive it is to live up here. I'm really in favor of increasing that Northern Residency tax deduction, something that my colleague Dennis Bevington has really championed in the House of Commons. I will continue that fight. And we also need to be working to reduce those two big expenses that a lot of people have here in the Territory, the high cost of diesel for diesel generators and heating oil. Those prices are only going to go up in the long term, so we need to be moving to more renewable energy sources so that we have a sustainable, reliable, cheap available source of energy, like ENR's biomass wood pellet boilers. We need to be moving communities over to that. The Con Mine Energy Project, I would fight for that federal funding to make sure that project can go forward. Those are a couple of examples of things that I would do or try to get done when I'm elected.
What will your party do about tackling the high amount of alcoholism and drug abuse in the Northwest Territories?
This is a common sense kind of thing. You know, you've got Justice Vertus of the Supreme Court of the Northwest Territories saying we need more rehabilitation, more treatment centers. We've got the head of the Canadian Medical Association, he was in the Yukon a couple of weeks ago, same thing, we need more rehabilitation and treatment centers. We've got a situation where people are getting thrown in jail, they have problems that they need help with, and they get out of jail and they just go straight back into the situation that they were in before. So our jail rates stay up, we've got people who need help that aren't getting it. I would work with whatever party forms the government to make sure that those territorial transfers and provincial transfers for healthcare are adequate so that we can be investing in treatment centers and rehabilitation centers to help these people. Everybody needs some help sometimes, and we need to be working to make sure that nobody gets left behind.
What do you think the root cause of all of our issues with the high alcoholism rates and the high drug rates are? What do you think the root cause of that is?
Well, you've got communities that are only open to the south for a short period of time during the winter with the ice roads, or you've got communities where you don't have that steady access of alcohol and whatnot. It's an entirely different lifestyle. So then when you have communities that are being opened up and these new issues start popping up, the communities aren't ready to deal with that. You need strong communities, strong community support in order to help people deal with those problems. I've talked to a couple of people, more than a couple of people, who have said, you know, you've got situations where kids are running around with nothing to do at night, there's no extracurricular activities, there are issues with parenting skills. I mean, you've got people who were taken away from their families, put in residential schools, and taken away from their parents, so they never learned how to be parents. It's an entirely different culture that people have been exposed to. So we need education, we need stronger communities, so that communities are coming together to support people and make sure that these issues are at the forefront and being dealt with, instead of just shuffling these people with problems into alleys or where you don't see them.
Do you think drug abuse is a criminal issue or a health issue?
I think it's a health issue. We've got a war on drugs that's been going on for the better part of the last century, especially against drugs like marijuana, where we're told, well, if you're buying marijuana, you're funding terrorists, or the health implications, oh my God, you're going to kill yourself. Well, you know what? We need a real adult conversation about these issues. We need education so that kids know the real effects of marijuana use and tobacco use and alcohol use. Alcohol and tobacco are regulated, taxed, there are warning labels on everything, whereas marijuana, you go into an alley, buy a joint, and you have no warnings, no regulation, you have no idea what you're actually buying. This is a health issue. We need education, we need treatment, and we need rehabilitation.
What will your party specifically do to provide new infrastructure in the Northwest Territories?
I will work with whichever party is elected and forms the government to make sure that northern issues like roads, like internet in every community in the Northwest Territories is a priority in Ottawa. We've got 125 other rural and northern ridings across Canada. I will set up meetings with those MPs. I will be walking the halls of Parliament and making sure that these MPs are coming together, finding common issues like additional spending on roads, like internet in every community across the Northwest Territories, across Canada. These are issues that affect all Canadians. And if individual MPs, those backbenchers who don't form government but have the power in Parliament, those MPs can come together and make a difference. We can make sure that the rest of Canada knows that these are important issues that need funding.
We got ravens and street cleaners coming by. That's awesome. And I tried interviewing Mr. Bevington yesterday. It was all of a sudden the street went from totally quiet to totally busy, like in 0 to 60. It was kind of inconvenient, actually.
No.
Okay, so in the Northwest Territories, is there anything that's a priority for the Green Party within the first year of?
Well, I have two priorities. In terms of, do you mean in terms of infrastructure or just in general?
Infrastructure.
I have two priorities. Number one, roads. We have communities that are cut off from the rest of the Northwest Territories, that are cut off from the rest of Canada. We need those roads. It'll reduce the cost of living. It'll increase tourism. And in today's global economy, we're told, we need an integrated society and integrated communities so that we can be competitive on the global market. Well, how can we do that if communities are cut off from the rest of Canada? So we need funding in place to be building the Mackenzie Highway, to be building that road between Inuvik and Tuk. The other thing for me, internet. We have communities where you're paying $100 a month for less than a megabit per second of internet bandwidth. My first experience with 1.5 megabits per second was 10 years ago here in Yellowknife. I mean, I can get better than that on my cell phone right here, right now. And we have initiatives. I'm really glad to see that the NDP and the Liberals are making this a priority. Unfortunately, they're setting the bar too low. 1.5 megabits per second in the first 3 years to every community in Canada doesn't cut it. It's the equivalent of upgrading everybody with 8-track players to cassette tapes when everybody else is using iPods. It doesn't work. We need a real goal for real high-speed internet across the Northwest Territories, across Canada, 5 megabits per second, 10 megabits per second. Anything less puts students and businesses at a huge disadvantage compared to everywhere else in the world.
What is your party's position on income taxes for NWT residents?
Well, we face a very high cost of living up here, so there needs to be recognition that the income taxes that we're spending are on an entirely different playing field than the rest of Canada. We're paying, take gas for example. If you're paying $1 a liter for gas in Edmonton, and you're paying $1.50 or $2 per liter or $2.50 in Inuvik, you're paying how much more GST just on that same liter of gas. So it works the same way for income taxes. If you make 40 grand in Toronto, you're paying income taxes, but your cost of living is so much lower as opposed to making 40 grand here in the Northwest Territories. The average income for somebody in the Northwest Territories is $45,000. When you take into account your rent or your mortgage payment, how much you're paying on groceries, gas, everything else, that's why we need to be moving forward on the Northern Residency income tax deduction, increasing that, pegging it to inflation so that we've got something that actually works year after year after year and helps people out.
So by pegging it to inflation, do you think there'll be any immediate benefit to the Green Party's tax plan right now?
Well, pegging it to the cost of living rather than inflation, because inflation fluctuates so much, whereas cost of living kind of takes into account more issues than just that. The thing is, you need to work with the other MPs in Ottawa, you need to work with whatever party is in power to try and get this stuff brought forward. The NDP worked for years to try and get a 50% increase, and the Conservatives put forward a 10% increase. So that's something where you need to be having negotiations, having meetings, working with whoever's in power to make sure that not only the Prime Minister or the Minister of Northern Affairs knows what the issues are, but you need to be getting together with those regular MPs who are facing exactly the same issues. If you come together with 50, 100, 150 MPs voicing that income tax in rural and northern communities is not working for average Canadians, that's when you get your voice heard. In terms of an immediate benefit, like I said, it all depends on how much support I can get from the other MPs in Parliament.
One question that I was asked to ask you specifically was, what will your party bring to in terms of sustainable energy solutions to the Northwest Territories?
We need to make sure that there is funding available for municipalities, for Aboriginal governments, for territorial governments to be moving forward on green initiatives. The great thing about wood pellet boilers, about the Con Mine Energy Project, about initiatives like that, is it saves money. If you as a city or as a town, you can invest in some of those high-cost infrastructure projects that save you money in the long term, that's a great thing. The only problem is a lot of those initiatives cost a lot of money up front, and it's hard for municipalities, for Aboriginal governments and territorial governments to actually raise that initial capital. That's why there needs to be federal support so that they can make those initial investments, they can qualify for those huge loans to get that infrastructure in place to pursue these green energy projects. The cities, I've talked to the mayor of Hay River, I've talked to the mayor of Smith, I've talked to the mayor of Yellowknife, they're all crying out for help with these types of initiatives, and the federal government needs to be stepping up.